Okay, let's talk about conduct. This one I think is especially vague when you just read the tenet. Interpreters conduct themselves in a manner appropriate to the specific interpreting situation. Okay. So, one of the things it talks about in the guiding principle is conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest, and so that's especially where that comes into play here as we talked about in the definitions. So let's look at 3.1. It says, consult with appropriate persons regarding the interpreting situation to determine issues such as placement and adaptations necessary to interpret effectively. Again, that kind of goes back to the professionalism tenet where it was talking about making sure that you make adjustments before or during the situation. You need to show up early to make sure that this is happening, and you have to be flexible enough to know that changes are going to happen during the interpreted situation. So, you do need to know where you're going to stand. I remember showing up for this one church service one time. Very often I'll church hop to help out to relieve other interpreters so that they get a week off. And I went to this one interpreter's church and showed up, and I did my little spiel to the pastor and to everybody and said, "Hi, I'm the interpreter," and explained my role. And I said, "Okay, so where should I stand up here?" Meaning close to the pulpit or what have you. And the pastor said, "Oh, no, women aren't allowed up here. You need to stand at the back of the church." And so the feminist inside of me wanted to be like, "What are you talking about? I have to stand at the back of the church. You know, that's just Lael, you know." And, but I kept my cool and I said, "Okay, well, as soon as the deaf person arrives, I'll let them know that, and we'll continue on and discuss where I should place myself." Because you know what? It's not my business. As soon as the deaf person shows up, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, good, this deaf person's going to set them straight, and I'm going to stand where I need to stand." And the deaf person's like, "Oh yeah, that's always where the interpreter stands. They stand at the back, so I'll go back there with you." So Lael just needed to suck up her pride and go where both of the consumers wanted her to go. Both of them wanted me there. That's where I go, you know? I'm not there to argue with them. Now, if there had been a dispute, then I would have let them hash it out. You know, let the deaf person say, "Well, I can't see you and the interpreter back there. I need to read your lips," whatever the case may be, dependent upon the deaf person. And you know what? That's their right. It's also the hearing person's right. And so you can't ever deny that the hearing person has a say also in where the interpreter should stand. For example, I've been in math classes before. And very often I try to trail the math teacher to make sure that we're up on the next problem so that we can see, the deaf person can both see my signs and see the problem on the board. However, if you think about it, if the teacher starts over here and is working their way through, and I'm standing next to them, I'm standing in front of the problem that they just wrote out on the board. And what are all of the students doing? They're copying down the problem that was just written on the board, because the teacher was standing in front of it prior to that. So henceforth, it's probably better for me to be on the other side of the teacher. And you may argue, well, it doesn't matter what the hearing people think. No, it does matter, because everybody in that classroom, all of the students, the teacher, whomever is in that classroom, they're all my consumers. And henceforth, I need to make sure that I am in the place where all of the consumers can best get the message of what's being conveyed to them. So henceforth I'm going to move wherever it's best for me to be. It's not just up to the deaf person, it's not just up to the hearing person or the hearing students, it's really a collaboration between everybody. So it's important to know and to kind of keep your own personal feelings to yourself, which I know can be difficult, trust me. 3.2 says decline assignments or withdraw from the interpreting profession when not competent due to physical, mental, or emotional factors. It's really important, you know, I think sometimes, especially, you know, work is work, and we try to accept things as best as we can, and we very often in the interpreting profession feel like, if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? We have this hero mentality, you know, and there are other people who can do it, or it can be put on hold. Most of the time, you know, most things are not an emergency, and so, you know, it's best for you to decline assignments as necessary. Also, this talks about, for example, I had to interpret one time at a conference, and I had done all of my prep like I was supposed to. I'd looked over all the PowerPoints, I'd looked over all of the stats, I'd looked over everything so that I felt really well prepared. Now, when I was a child, I was molested, and maybe that's TMI, I don't know, but I was, and so I knew that one of the presentations I was going to be interpreting was on sexual abuse of deaf children, and if you've ever looked at the stats of that, it is horrendous. It's horrendous because the abusers always think to themselves, who are they going to tell? And you know what? Most of the time they're right. Who are they going to tell? Because most of the time their families can't even sign with them. Awful. Awful and ugly and disgusting to think about, but it's true. So I had already prepped myself. I knew that's what I was going to be interpreting about. I felt comfortable enough with it to feel like I could convey the message pretty accurately, because I've dealt with some of my own stuff, and I've done those types of presentations before in sign language, and I was fine. Well, when I got to the assignment, I realized that the speaker was deaf, meaning I was going to have to voice this information into English. And I can't explain it to you, but there's just something very different about speaking about something in your native language versus speaking about it in a second language. And all of a sudden realizing that I was going to have to be speaking about these ugly, disgusting things that I had experienced myself in English, I didn't know if I could keep my voice from quivering. I didn't know. And so I went to the conference coordinator and explained what was going on, and she was like, not a problem, we're going to switch you out with someone else who's doing a presentation on cochlear implants, and it's not a problem. And I explained my situation to the other interpreter, who happened to be one of my friends, and she's like, not a problem, she already knew my background. And we switched. I looked at her notes for the next presentation, she looked at mine for that presentation, we were fine. Ideally, in the future, I probably should look at things a little more carefully and turn them down using discretion, because really my emotional and mental factors in that situation were not to the point where I should have accepted that, you know, and I realized that looking back on it. Also physical factors, you know, if you know that you have back problems and you're going to be standing the entire time at an assignment and there's no way that you can sit down because maybe it's a tour or something to that effect, you may want to turn that down. You really do need to look at all of the factors before placing yourself in something. Sometimes your schema meaning all of your background knowledge, all of your own experiences, everything that makes you who you are, sometimes that's going to help you and sometimes it's going to hurt you. And for example, if you know that you're going to be interpreting at MD Anderson, the premier hospital on cancer, and your mom had breast cancer and died there, you may be the best interpreter for that situation because your schema, you know everything there is to know about breast cancer, and you may be the worst interpreter to interpret in that situation because it's still too close to home. And you just need to know yourself well enough, again, know your self-identity well enough to know if you should decline that or go ahead and accept that situation. Conduct obviously is a long one, so I'm going to continue this on the next video, but just be thinking about that, mulling over in your own head, what are some situations that maybe you should or shouldn't accept dependent upon your own life experiences. Okay, we'll continue on in a minute. Thanks.